So we've got a good number in now, so we'll get started. So we'll just start with a very quick intro to Log My Care. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are Log My Care. We're a care management software provider with a mission to help care providers to deliver more proactive care. We truly believe that with the right technology and data, preventative outcomes can be a reality and lives can really be transformed. So we're really proud of the platform that we've built, and our customers kind of applaud us for how intuitive and straightforward it is for their teams to pick up. We're loved by over 2,000 providers across the entire care landscape, and you can see here, we've really spread out. And some of our kind of providers, customers, you can see here are Shaftesbury, Look Ahead, MenCap. So yeah, really, really kind of focusing on the complex care and learning disability care space. So yeah, I will now hand over to Giuseppe. Giuseppe is a true expert in PBS. He has a real passion for it, and I know that you're going to learn so much from him today. Just very quickly, actually, I've got a few kind of housekeeping bits. So as I mentioned before, don't forget to drop your questions in the chat, as we'll be getting these answered at the end for you. We're also going to be releasing some polls throughout the webinar as well, so do engage with these. And just a quick note, if you are experiencing slow speed, maybe close down any unused tabs that you have open, as Demio doesn't like this. It can sometimes slow down the platform. So yeah, over to you, Giuseppe.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, first of all?
We can hear you.
Amazing, because, you shouldn't give anything as granted with technology. So, welcome, everybody. I'm Giuseppe Di Martino, as Chloe kindly introduced me. I am a psychologist and a PBS coach, and I do love PBS. I truly have a proper passion about it. I don't like to define myself as an expert, but as a passionate user of PBS. On a day-to-day basis, I work as a commissioner for a local authority in the southeast of England, and I do see firsthand how difficult it is for providers to get it right, but I also see firsthand how successful it can be when you get it right, how much it can improve the quality of life of your service user, as well as the life of your staff, as well as the outcome for your service. So honestly, it's a win-win situation. So a lot of wins there are basically. Today we will try, obviously 1 hour is really not a lot of time to go through the PBS as a whole. Honestly, it wouldn't be enough a lifetime, I suppose, for how much there is about PBS and how rich this model of support is. However, today we will try to give a bit of a panoramic on a few important areas which I believe are the foundation of a very good PBS plan. And I welcome all of you in this webinar today to get in touch if you have any particular queries, if you want to go a bit further into your understanding of implementing. Anything that comes to mind, please, let's make this session as engaging as possible, as interactive as possible. It's not a lesson, it's for us to share and to understand together, basically. So, first of all, I believe when we talk about PBS, we need to consider how this is a value-led system, how this is a person-centered model, and how this builds within your organization culture. Then we will go and explore person-centered planning. I think we will not spend a lot of time on that. I'm assuming all the people in this talk today are quite very well versed already in person-centered support plan. Helpful when we go into looking at the section, and then we go into the thick of the actual planning, which is your functional behavioral assessment. I don't know what happened there. Can you still hear me? I think you can. I'm assuming you can. I can see the green thing going on, so you're probably there. Oh, great. So I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. So when we go into the functional assessment, we will go into the proper details of what we do practically in order to make our plan a positive behavior support plan, because that needs to be scientifically informed. Then once we have all the data and information, we will go and see how we design and implement the plan, how do we renew that, and what technology can do for us, because PBS is a database system. Therefore, I believe technology has a wide scope into that. First of all, let's start with what is PBS. PBS is very much a method, a framework, a series of tools, an approach, and a way of delivering support, which is very much rooted in a value based model and very much rooted in the human rights. So what you will going to do in PBS is not managing behavior. What you're actually doing in implementing PBS is finding a way to work successfully with your team and service user together to co-produce solution for the service user in order to prevent occasions in which the distress is experienced and therefore the behavior is manifested. We need to consider behavior as a form of communication. When we are not able to say things, when we are not able to express ourselves properly, we act. As instance, if you are in a room where it's getting boring, like, I don't know, you find this webinar boring, at some point you log out, that is exactly what a behavior as a form of communication. With your behavior of logging out, you are communicating that you are not engaging with the system. Some behaviors, obviously, may be a bit more disruptive than just logging out. I get that. But what the PBS is proactively working with the person, and specifically that person, to understand what motivates that behavior, what triggers that behavior, and what's the communication behind that behavior. Therefore, what you do with PBS is not about managing the incidents, managing the behavior, or managing occurrences in which challenges are occurring. That's already too late. PBS comes before that. PBS is you working with your service user to improve their quality of life, because preventing the occurrence and recurrence of behavior, you will actually facilitate them in their learning, in their skills development, in their independence, because what you will going to do is to create an environment around them. And for environment, we actually include also the people that are part of that environment. So if you think about a service, environment is your premises, your external environment is in like sun or rain or whatever happens outside, as well as the people in the service, how they speak to your service user, what they say, when they say it. All of those things are important, because as we realized in a communication not long ago, we are a potential trigger for behavior ourselves, actually. So our communication as well needs to really be considered. What does it mean, value-led, person-centered culture? We hear this a lot. We hear it everywhere. Honestly, I've been in care for probably 15 years, I suppose. Yeah. Some year more. I don't want to really show that I'm very old, actually, but yeah, it must have been just short of 20 years. What I've noticed is, more often than not, we have brilliant plans. We have brilliant intention behind those plans, but those are not integrated within our organization or within our teams or within what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? So when you do PBS, you can very much just put on ChatGPT, do me a PBS, because it's very likely that I never tried, to be honest, but it's possible ChatGPT will do whatever they think a PBS plan is. And then you put it in the folder. It's great. CQC comes, look at your service. You have a PBS plan. Then they start to see whether this plan matches with whatever else is going on in the organization. And it looks like it's not. And not surprisingly, the organization is still experiencing a high level of incident. The organization is still experiencing struggles in retaining the staff, in working with specific cohort of service users. And that is because we have not created a framework around our model of positive behavior support. Therefore, what I generally tend to recommend is to think about what is an organization-wide PBS. For organization-wide PBS, it means that it starts from the top. It starts from your bosses, your senior leadership team. It starts from your CEO, the board, your references group, your engagement, all of it is part of what PBS is. Therefore, when we started PBS, we start developing policies, mission, statement, values that reflects our ambition of implementing PBS. This is generally made, making sure that we create an organizational chart for PBS delivery, so we know exactly who's responsible to do what and what time in relation to which task. We assign very clear role. We make sure that those roles receive the right support to perform, because I've been in a situation, I will not name any providers, but I've been in a situation once where actually I was tasked basically to design a policy for an organization. But within this organization, the register manager was actually meant to also be responsible for the PBS implementation across a system of services. It's not a problem. However, this manager was not provided with the right tools or the time or the space to do that. Therefore, comes by itself. The model doesn't stand. You need to have a good investment in terms of resources for your staff in learning, in developing. We're talking of quarterly training. We're talking of regular reflective practice with the teams. We are talking of hands-on simulation, and especially what I really recommend to all of you, because we plan for the best and we are assuming that once you implement your plan, everything will work just absolutely fine. And most of the time, if you do it right, that's how it goes. However, we also need to consider that crisis may arise. The best plan is not a perfect plan. It's always a working document. It changes as you go. So what I would recommend strongly is to have in place a crisis plan, because try to think about it. In a situation of heightened emotion, in a situation where in a split of a second would make a difference, even between life or death, I'm not joking, you need to have very clear in mind what you're meant to do, and you need to know that everybody around you does exactly the same thing. So basically, when we were going to talk about capable environment in a minute, what we're actually saying is that this capable environment expands to your staff team and the entire organization. Everything needs to be predictable, anything needs to be clear from the beginning, and everybody needs to have rehearsed to make that happen possible. Because think about it, somebody is banging their head on the wall, so you need to intervene physically because you don't want them to die, basically. You want to prevent them to end up hurting themselves. So you need to know who is going to take whichever tool is needed in that situation, who is clearing up the room around, who is removing obstacles. That needs to be very clearly spelled up in a plan. You need to have that very clear in mind, because you cannot come to a situation of crisis and say, oh, wait a minute, who's going to take the drawers out of the way? Too late. So, summarizing, you develop a mission statement, you make sure core values that respond to PBS are in there, you make sure that there is a clear hierarchical structure within your organization of how that PBS is implemented, and you make sure to invest in the resources, because learning is half of the job, I always say, actually. So if your staff is well trained, they will probably be likely to make a difference in implementing the model. Going into person-centered planning, here we have a very brief panoramic, actually, because as I said, I'm expecting you all do that. I believe that if you are here today at this session is because you want to do a good job. And if you want to do a good job, 100% you do person-centered planning. I'm convinced of that. And if you don't, please start today. When you do a person-centered planning, what you're actually doing is that co-production effort that we mentioned. You sit down with your service user in an ideal world, or you sit down with a representative, maybe the social worker, maybe the family, an advocate, somebody who knows them well. And if I may please, there's no such a thing as too many sources of information. So whenever and wherever you are able to gather vital information with consent from the person you are supporting, obviously, or the representative, it's good to gather as much comprehensive picture as you can. You will work with those people around you, this circle of support, as is often called, and it's actually a name I really love. If I have to be honest, I'm very partial to that name. When you do your investigation, your analysis, your information gathering, you will end up knowing all the strengths, weaknesses, their interests, their outcomes. So let's say there is Joe Blog. Joe Blog likes football, is a big Arsenal supporter, and likes to cook bacon and eggs. Just making it up. And he gets distressed when there is too loud noises, and if it's raining, he prefers to stay indoor. But if there is the sun and doesn't go out, actually, that may trigger behavior of concern, as he's enjoying walking in the park, blah, blah. I mean, this is basically the pictures that you get about somebody. You record all those information, you make sure to make them in an actionable plan, therefore having goals for that specific person, how you reach those goals. I don't want to sit here and teach you how to suck eggs. I'm pretty sure you understand that. But what you do is gather the information, understand who the person is beyond their diagnosis, beyond their behavior, beyond their challenges. The person first, always the person first. And that's why probably it's called person-centered, I suppose. The Q is in the name there. Once you have your person-centered plan, you are ready to work with Joe Blog. Joe Blog comes to your service. And here it starts your PBS. Ideally, you would do that during a transition phase. I'm aware that as time goes by, transition becomes more and more a sort of chimera. Transition seems to be not something that authorities are able to fund at the moment. Therefore, more often than not, you find yourself working with a client straight away without really knowing them deeply. If you can, I would suggest you push back because knowing somebody, it's very important. This job, support worker job, care job, social work job, psychology job, they are all made of people. They are all made of relationship. If there's no relationship, there's no outcomes. You cannot possibly work with somebody without building a relationship with them, which is also why it's very important in your person-centered planning that also recruitment reflect the value of PBS. Therefore, you match your staff with the people who have some similar sort of interest, or maybe speak the same languages, maybe have the same value system, maybe have something that mirrors it, because representation is very important. And for people having someone they can relate to, it's very important. In your life, every day that happens, and it's probably the most common things, you tend to associate yourself with people that do the things you like, or that share your same values and interests. And so happen in cares is a job of relationships. So Joe Blog is suitable. You have all the information about what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do. Now it's time to look at how this becomes a positive behavior framework friendly plan. So we go into the functional behavior aspect of it. The functional behavior assessment is literally the most important part that does a PBS. What you do here is basically using standardized forms to collect background information from the people around them. So if before you had those conversations in which you were understanding what Joe likes to do, right now you will move one step forward and use what are actual assessment tool. I'm talking of functional behavioral assessment. I'm talking of motivational assessment scale, fast scale. I'm very happy actually after this webinar, or if you want, you find most of it already on my website, The Best Firm, which is on the top of the slide there. And I think Log My Care has a lot of these resources as well. So please get in touch with us if you need the actual template forms, tools to understand how they look and how they work. You meet again with the person, and I cannot insist enough of how important it is that you meet with the person as much as you can. There is no such a thing as the person is not capable to tell me X, Y, Z, because they may not be able to tell you a lot of things, but there is definitely something that they can communicate with you. And you can top up that communication with the information you receive from the people around you, your direct observation, other professionals, because I'm assuming, unless you're working with somebody who's completely new to all the professional, there is a history there. There is records that you can go through. And those inform your plan. Basically, what you do in this phase is understanding why somebody is doing X. So why is Joe throwing a ball at me every day? Why is that happening? So you start to look through these tools that you will be using, assessment tools. What's the motivation behind it? Is Joe trying to avoid an event? Is Joe trying to avoid a task? Is Joe trying to tell me he wants to do a task? Is Joe trying to tell me he doesn't like me? Is just trying to tell me the food is cold, is hot, is not of his like, you go and find what's behind that behavior in order for you to be able to do something about it, because we need to know how it works. So you conduct your structured interviews, you use your functional analysis screening tools, and let's make it practical, yeah? This week, I'll take my functional assessment tool, the one I like the most, and please don't be partial to it. You can use whichever one you fancy the most. The one I like the most is the motivation assessment scale, for the simple facts, which is a ticking box tool, and is easy to be used also by people who are not clinicians or not mental health professionals. So it's a very straightforward tool to use. You will think about a single behavior, a specific one, and then you repeat the same task for every behavior. So let's say the behavior is Joe is throwing this ball at me. That's the only thing I will look at. So I will respond to all the questions in the assessment. Hopefully, if my observation have been thorough enough, I will come to an assumption of what's Joe's behavior. So I will look what happened before the behavior. I will look at the behavior in itself, making sure I'll describe that behavior in very functional terms. So Joe is throwing the ball. It's not a functional description. A functional description is Joe is raising his right hands to throw the ball, the blue ball, with significant strength towards this specific person at this time of the day while he was doing this specific. This is a functional description. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be broken down in specific parts so you can understand exactly which one you need to work on. Once you've done this functional analysis, you have your assumption. So I may say, oh, actually, looks like the motivation behind this is avoidance. And it seems to me that what Joe is trying to avoid is to do the wash up. Again, I'm just making it all up. None of this is a real case. Joe doesn't want to do the wash up, so he's throwing the ball at me. This is my assumption. Therefore, I make an hypothesis, like if I was doing a proper research job, right? So my hypothesis is, with all the data that I've plotted, I can put it on a graphic to establish a trend, which is something I think Log My Care does very well, or I can just write it down in a list. I can, honestly, the limit is the sky, but if you use a tool, then make sure that that tool is suitable as is Log My Care assistant. You can use those insights to develop an if-then hypothesis. So the hypothesis is, if Joe is asked to do the wash-up, will throw the ball at me. And this is how you basically manage your functional behavioral assessment. So to summarize, I know who's Joe, what he likes and what he wants to do. I go and look more into details, what behaviors Joe presents that may actually prevent him from doing the things he likes to do. I understand what's behind it by using a structured tool. MAS is my suggestion for all of you, because you can use it very simply without any training. Actually, it's self-explanatory, the tool in itself. You use ABC charts because you want to know antecedents, behavior, and consequence. I believe all of you use those already. It's become nowadays actually a very common incident management tool, also beyond PBS, which I'm very keen of because it gives us a lot of useful information. You put all of this information on a table, on a list, on a document for you to actually analyze them. And once you analyze all the information, you try to find trend patterns, which a data analysis system will probably offer you straight away. And once you have these patterns, you formulate your if-then hypothesis for each of the behavior. So you repeat the same task for every behavior. It may be throwing something, it may be swearing, it may be self-harming, it may be anything. Just make sure that your description actually tells, if somebody is hitting their head, I need to tell with what hand, how strong, how many times. Really, there's no too small details that you can neglect. All those data actually will inform your plan. Once you have done this analysis and formulated your hypothesis, please make sure you do this not in isolation. You do this with your team. You do this with the person you support. You do this with their carer. This is very much a concerted effort. This is very much a co-produced initiative. You cannot just decide for somebody and then expect them to do what you say. I mean, that's it's very unrealistic in general. Unless you're somebody's manager, you can ask them what to do, I suppose. So, and even in that case, a lot of people would still not do it, by the way. So you need to make sure that they are active part of creating this plan. Their voice needs to be heard because they will be actually do the things. So this is a co-produced effort. You can actually allocate specific behaviors to each member of your team. It's something that I did a lot in the past. I used to have 5 different members of the team looking at 5 different behaviors, then coming together in a reflective practice session to discuss and come to a plan. That makes them owning that plan because they've created it, basically, which is what you want, I suppose, actually. Now you have your hypothesis. You have established what drives Joe's behavior, and you realize that it's actually not the fact that Joe doesn't just wants to upset you. I've read that in plans. It's not only a joke, guys. I actually read somewhere on an ABC chart, I think it's doing to upset us, something like that. Now, needless to say, that tells me a lot about you as a person rather than Joe. But yeah, just assume that they will not do it to annoy you. Nobody's behaving to annoy you. You need to start to enter into the mentality that when people are displaying behavior of distress, they are in fact distressed. And they're not experiencing a very good time in that moment. So trust me, nobody's doing in spite of you. Nobody's doing because they don't like you. Nobody's doing it because something. It may be that you said a thing or you made a gesture so insignificant from your perspective that you don't understand the behavior, where the behavior comes from. But if you look close enough and look at it in a functional perspective of what is actually happening without any value added to it, it's just the description of what you see in front of you, you would realize a lot of information and you would understand that behind that behavior, as we said at the beginning, there is a clear communication of, I am not okay, please help me being okay. Because that's really what a behavior is, guys. It's for you as well. When you're in distress, what you're actually showing is, I'm not okay. You are not showing, I don't like you. Maybe you do, but that's a different set of rules. It's not PBS anyway. So we now have our hypothesis. We know exactly what is happening with Joe. We know what Joe likes, and all the team is aware of what's going on. So now is the time we develop our positive behavior support plan. We come together with our team. We have our very thick pile of paper of all the analysis that we've done, and I'm really hoping that it's very, very thick, guys. There's no such a thing as too many information. There's no such a thing as too many data. There are a lot of things as irrelevant data, but if you look at the behavior, nothing is irrelevant. So you sit down with your team, you engage with Joe, you make sure his family is involved, the social worker, CPN, any sort of support you may have, any sort of professional who's involved in Joe's life, any friends, families, could be a good supporter within this plan. Because very important fundamental things when working with PBS is to make sure that everybody does the same thing in the same way consistently. We need to create a capable environment. We need to create an environment that is predictable. This means that think about it, when you go home, you enter, you know exactly where you leave your keys, and then your coats, then you walk in the kitchen, putting the kettles on. You don't think of any of this task. You just do everything automatically because everything is in its right place and you know exactly what to do. Well, guys, that's a capable environment, actually. That's a predictable environment. That's exactly what we want to create for our service user. They need to know and they need to experience and feel very confident and comfortable that A corresponds to B, always. So sometimes you will notice that very simple, insignificant things trigger a behavior. I found myself, I was talking with a colleague not long ago. There's this gentleman, lovely guy, doesn't really exhibit many behavior, but there's been a situation in which just before going out in the community, which is a very weird thing. So, do you ever say I'm going out in the community? I never said that. So yeah, basically people going out, he starts to get distressed apparently and hitting stuff, which prevent him to go out, which makes the behavior escalate even more. Observing the situation, what came up as very clear is staff was preparing to go out. Then just before going out was going back in to collect, I believe was the alertcom or something that they needed to carry with them. And that needs to be picked up from the office. So that situation was creating a lot of anxiety for the service user because they don't understand what's going on unless you explain it to them. And I believe that they did not explain to the service user in a way that it was for him understandable. So the behavior, they assumed he was excited to go out and that's what triggered the behavior. No, turns out the staff triggered the behavior because he was meant to wait when was already out of that door. Out of that door means going out, doesn't mean wait. So the communication there is very important. Therefore, when we develop our behavior support plan, the first and foremost things that we do is we look at the communication. For communication, I mean, we need to establish very clearly what the person likes to be, in which way they like to be talked to, whether they need visual support for communication, whether they need specs, a tablet with Proloquo Go, or the other one, I don't remember, Smartbox, or maybe if they need talking mats, or they need a video, or they need somebody doing Makaton, sign languages. infinite way of communicating, right? That needs to be very clear in the plan, as well as it needs to be very clear what wording to use for situation that could potentially be triggering assistance. Let's go and have lunch when you still have not prepared the lunch. It's possible to trigger a behavior for somebody who's not understanding that before eating there's the preparation, right? We give a lot of things as granted because in our experience they are, but there's no such a thing as an obvious thing, guys. Trust me. It's obvious for you, it's not for someone else. So all these things needs to be very clearly spelled out. And this regards all of the behaviors. So the beginning of your plan will have the comprehensive person-centered pictures, a very thorough communication plan that tells me clearly how I make myself understood by this person and how this person can communicate successfully with me their intention, to then go into the deep PBS planning, which is your strategies. So we have our preferences, we have our ideas, we have our understanding of what the customers likes to do, and these are the things that we will use for our planning, as well as the communication. So we have our behavior list of all the behavior we think are causing distress to the person and what we do about it. You need to really pay attention on how I'm putting a lot of emphasis on causing distress to the person rather than the environment of you. The real difference that there is between PBS and the model PBS comes from, which is the applied behavioral analysis, of which I am not a big fan, honestly, is the emphasis on which behavior needs supporting. In ABA, what we go and do is to make sure that you fit in the environment. So what we actually do is learning how to mask. I'm not a fan of it at all. What we do with PBS is make sure that it's what causing distress to your service user, to that person that we work on. Because flapping doesn't cause any harm to nobody. And if people have a problem with flapping, maybe they need help, not the person flapping, actually, if you want my opinion. There are a series of behavior which are socially unacceptable, assistance, exhibiting yourself. So obviously those sort of things you need to work on them, because it's either illegal or immoral, depending on what's your cultural framework, of course. But you need to make sure that the behavior you work on are a distress for the service user and not something that you want to change, because it's not about you, it's about your service user, their quality of life, and obviously improving their quality of life in return will make your outcomes and your service successful, your retention higher. But you do it for the quality of life of your service user. You never do it because because I don't know, you just want the service to be quiet, or you want to have a nice shift. These are all wrong reasons. I've been in situation in which I heard that. It's a very bad situation, though. I'm pretty sure none of this applies to you. So with our communication and our person preferences, we can sit again in co-production with our team or the service user or their carers, or all of them together. Why not? Maybe not in the same meeting, it's a bit too many people. Maybe organize different sessions with each of the people to gather your information. You go to design strategies. The first biggest parts of your strategy is your antecedent intervention. Basically, what you do is to prevent a behavior to occur. Because as I said at the beginning, guys, if we go into a situation in which we have to intervene on a crisis, then our PBS has failed. Honestly, it did fail. What we need to do is to create assistance, a daily schedule of preferred activities for your service user alongside what's their structured routines, and this schedule can be put in key areas of your service, so the service user is always able to access information in a format that is accessible to them, that they can understand, without the need to depend from stuff. Because what will make your prevention strategy successful is to give your service user agency, control. Think of you. When do you feel more distressed? When do you feel more disappointed? When do you feel in a flight or fight mode? When you're not in control, when you don't have agency on what you're actually doing. There, the fight or flight answer and freeze as well comes in straight away. So if I'm able to have control over my day, therefore I can access my schedule, my routine, I can choose how to move things on it. What I used to do was Velcro boards, but probably right now technology does better things. But 15 years ago, we were doing Velcro boards for the sort of thing. So service user could just go there and says, you know what, I don't want to go swimming today. I want to go pooling today. And there's no reason why you couldn't do it that way. So you give them agency, you give them control. You make sure that in this system, you prevent, basically, what I'm trying to say is that you need to prevent anxiety through predictability. An environment that is predictable doesn't make me anxious. An environment that doesn't make me anxious doesn't make me act on my behavior. Because I am balanced, I am in control, and I know exactly what comes before and next, which is another thing I would suggest. Obviously, please, these are strategies I found successful, and I'm using as example for you to understand which areas to go and look into. It doesn't mean that it will necessarily work for your service users, right? But what you need to do is to give them control to reduce anxiety and predictability. What I did was also now and then boards. So now we go swimming, then we go shopping. I don't know, just making it up. The second bit is replacement behavior. Obviously, we decided that throwing a plate at me is not a very good way to tell me you are hungry, right? So we need to find a way for you to communicate the same thing without smashing a plate on my head, which would be a very good result, wasn't it? So let's say we want to use the plate example. So there is something that could hurt me physically, which is hiding a communication of wanting to terminate something, wanting to start something, wanting something, right? Because these are generally the dynamic that you will find facing yourself. I want something, I don't want something. It's very much about that. Or I am in pain, because that's very important as well. You should always remove physical pain before actually any intervention. So the person throws the plate at me because they're hungry. I start introducing something different for them to communicate with me. So I reduce the reaction to the behavior I don't want. So if they throw something at me, I walk out, I disengage, to create a healthy boundary. It's not that I just shout at you, that would be bad. That would be a safeguarding. So I create a healthy boundaries by discouraging the bad behavior. And I give you a tool for that communication. So if the person uses specs, which I think is probably the easiest one, because they can create their own catalog of images, right? So they can take a pictures to tell me I'm hungry instead of throwing a plate at me. A lot of trial and error to implement this element. So when they throw a plate, I actually show them the pictures and then bring them food to a point that they will come to me with the pictures when they want food rather than throwing a plate. And this is what is called skill building, because what we're doing is to giving them the tools to communicate effectively without having to present that distress. I would always suggest you to use naturalistic methods to teach skills. Don't create situation on purpose. That's very mean. And to be honest, it's a very gray area whether that's an ethical issue, because me creating a situation in which you experience distress for me to teach you a skill seems quite mean from my perspective. So use natural situation when they occur. Don't create a situation, because it's against human rights as far as I don't know if it is, I'm not a lawyer. I would assume it's very much against human rights. Also, one thing I would like to suggest when you work on skill building for more complex tasks, assistance cooking or brushing your teeth, tying laces, quite functional skills, I would suggest you to go backwards. I would suggest you to basically start from the last step. I'll make you an example. I was teaching a lady of Italian heritage, actually, and I'm Italian myself, how to make pizza, because I like to make pizza. Who doesn't like to make pizza? Come on. The first thing we did is she was present in the kitchen while we were making the dough, but the things that she had agency on the first time around was to pull out the pizza from the oven, which is basically the last task you do when you make a pizza. This is because doing that, the rewards you get is immediate. Basically, you make X and you get a reward straight away, the pizza, right? The smell of the pizza, the touch of all the sensory associated with pizza is a reward at the end of the day. Then the following day, they will put the pizza in the oven. Then the following one, they will put toppings on the pizza. Then the previous one, they will probably stretch the dough, and so backwards. Same things with brushing teeth. The first things they ask them to do independently is to spit the water out, because I win, I've done it, I made it, and that motivates me to do the second step, and then the second step, and then the second step. Is a trick they teach you as a behavioral analyst, and we said we don't like behavioral analysis, but we can still take the good things that were part of it, which is how you teach skill. Actually, if I have to be honest, I think it's the best way to teach skills to children as well. So I would probably use it in general for skill building. I don't think there's anything, as long as you do it in naturalistic situation. Then obviously we need to assume that although we are perfect and we are doing a massive, great, fantastic job and we never have incident, at some point incidents are bound to happen because you are not in control of everything. You go out that is sunny, then all of a sudden starts raining. The person you're supporting doesn't like the rain. They may show a behavior of distress there and then. So you need to plan for what is a reactive strategy. Reactive strategies, the way I see it, is very much a step-by-step de-escalation plan, starting from the least restrictive to the most restrictive intervention. It starts from verbal de-escalation. It starts from removing the distressor, if you can. Most of the times, unfortunately, you cannot really remove distressors. It can be inviting the person into a quiet room, removing the people from the room where the person is displaying distressor, removing all the dangers around items that the person can use to harm themselves or others. All of these elements, go and make your crisis plan, up to PRN medication, and absolutely last resort, trust me, you can count in a lifetime on one hand the number of situations who may potentially need restraining. You may have to go down that route. I never recommended it. There hasn't been any in my services personally, although I've worked with very, very complex service use. I mean, we emptied former secure residential unit, moved everybody in supported living services, never restrained anyone. Because you don't need to. If you work very well in preventative strategies, if you have a very good data supporting your strategies, if the team is very much working as one, it's very unlikely you get crisis. But you can plan for them. You can have a step-to-step guide. Let's call it green, amber, red strategy. I don't know. Let's whichever way you want to call it. Make sure that it goes in steps. So from please don't do that to I need to stop you right now physically because you will kill yourself otherwise. It needs to be followed in this way. You don't start and restrain somebody. You don't give them PRN because they're being annoying. You never do such things, because if you do, first of all, you are breaching human rights. Second, you should not really consider that something as suitable, because you will not accept it for yourself. And third of all, since when restriction and prohibition promoted change or positive outcomes? It never did. It never worked. I mean, the entire pedagogy is made of punishing people, doesn't work. So I'm not really why we would consider that as the first thing. It's really the last of the thing. There's no such a thing as punishment. There is understanding of communication and measure put in place to prevent the distress. That's all about it. It's very important that with your documents, your support plan, where you have the pen pictures of the person as person, you have the communication, all the strategies for each of the behavior. So throwing the ball, kicking the basket, banging the head on whichever the behavior is. There's infinite list. For each of them, you do reactive strategies, crisis management, which is your reactive strategies, and you need to include recovery strategy. You need to understand that when behaviors comes in, there is always a bit of, how do we call it, guilty associated with it. If even when I'm angry and I slap you, right, I may feel righteous in that moment, but I feel very bad afterwards. Because, come on, that's not me. I wouldn't do it. Why did I do that? You feel bad. So there has to be strategy in place to repair the relationship. There has to be a strategy in place to make the person understand that you accept them, you acknowledge them, and you recognize that they can have challenges. This doesn't make them bad. So you have some activities which are activities of like, in which you can facilitate that recovery. And also, if you make sure to build a schedule of activities and initiatives that are suitable for your service user, in which they have a say, you will reduce even further that likelihood. As we said before, you outline roles and responsibilities. Who does what when needs to be very clear. I mean, you mean to say John will log the incident while Jane will review the logs every Friday and Mark will speak with family once a month. This needs to be spelled out very clearly. There is a situation in which even your reactive strategies may not work. Therefore, you need to have a crisis plan in place. You need to do your crisis plan not in isolation. Your crisis plan needs to be done with crisis services, basically. Sounds fun to say, but that's exactly how it does it. So what you need to do is plan for where things go very wrong, which may involving, you know, mental health professional, hospitalization, or whichever situation is there. In my services, we had a specific crisis management system for which we were creating safer environment within the service. But, you know, not all providers have specific spaces that they can use for that. So you need to liaise with potentially the NHS for when you just can't do it. You don't want to go there. If you go there, you know, that's a placement breakdown, unfortunately. But there may be occurrences you need to be aware of that. I wanted to mention it. So 90% of it is in your prevention strategies and skill building. 10% is your crisis management, if we want to make it simple. Once you've done it, just simply, you need to monitor this PBS plan, right? So it means having a system in place. I would strongly, it's not because this guy, trust me, if you were contacting me and Log My Care has nothing to do with it, I would still recommend you to use a digital system. Because an electronic system will allow you to categorize the data, will allow you to collect data seamlessly, will allow you to collect data quickly, which is very significant as well. And also to analyze this without being a data analyst. Not everybody has research background, not everybody understands how to use Excel. So please use a digital system. It's the best bet for you. Those you will be blessed in those. It may be as simple as Power BI, as complex as, I don't know, any clinical software out there. I'm sure there's thousands. Actually, I don't think there's many, to be honest. But you use a software because that's the best way to gather and collect your data. You then hold a regular meeting with the entire team to monitor the progress of the person, not necessarily in relation to the incident, but also on the day-to-day activities, what happened, what is going on, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and whatnot. So if data shows that somebody is agitated at a particular activity or particular time of the days, you can work on how to improve that specific aspect with the team. Let's call it, I used to call it feedback loops, basically, where bi-weekly I used to do it, but let's say it's at least once a month, you should kind of do that. At the beginning, much more frequently. Then I would suggest to arrange one-to-one supervision with somebody outside of your organization, what we call reflective practice, right? You as a manager, you can definitely support the teams into the practical aspect of it, but there is an emotional element attached to positive behavior support because you are dealing with situations that are somehow, sometimes distressful for your team as well. So supporting them in managing those situations will help them to support your service user. I tend to do that in a few organizations, very few organizations actually, for time capacity issue, but I'm very keen to have that conversation in case it's something you may want to consider. I would make sure that you set goals for improvement with this stuff, as well as giving them room for experimenting with PBS. Not necessarily on the person, please don't do that, but to work on ideas, strategies, initiatives, activities, planning, because being part of something makes you more likely to understand what's going on, rather than just doing because my manager said so. My manager said so works for a very short period of time for a very few numbers of people, actually. So finally, you in supervision needs to guide your staff in relation to what improvement they need, if they need some time off, if they need more training, if they need better understanding, if they're suitable for that service user or they're better off working with someone else. These are all considerations that you do. So this is all part of your monitoring to ensure that there is quality assurance in place, because having a plan, put it in a folder and do nothing about it, it's a waste of time and resources that you cannot really afford nowadays. So make sure that the plan is a working document, is there every day, we talk about it all the times, nothing that in it is silly, basically. And make sure the person is involved in each and every part of the process as much as they can, or their representative, because if you're doing a suit for me, you need to take my measurement. So I need to be part of that process. You cannot just guess. If you guess it, that's M, XL, S, which is fairly suitable, but not for me. A tailored suit will always be better. So make sure that your PBS plan is tailored, is not an available size. Any question?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Giuseppe. As always, that was incredibly insightful. We have a lot of questions, actually. So first one is from Katie. Do you need to be qualified to do a functional behaviour assessment?
Yes. The functional behavioral assessment, well, in England, you don't need to be qualified for a lot of professions. However, is a tool and a practice that needs training. So rather than qualified, I would say you need to be trained. A lot of clinical work in United Kingdom is not regulated, right? Everybody can say they're a psychologist. I really don't agree with that, but everybody can say they're a psychologist. I am for real, by the way. So you could, but I would not recommend. It's quite complicated doing a functional behavioral assessment. So you need to either provide the training to the team, and I think British Institute of Learning Disability provides that training. It's a very long one as well. I think last 6 months or something. So you need to do that. Or you need to book somebody that is trained. But yeah, I would suggest that that's a psychologist's job, yeah.
Fantastic. And
you can use MAS. MAS is very free. It's very simple to use. I mean, it's a bit like when you do those personality tests that you tick boxes. Same thing, actually. You can do it without training, but not the full functional behavioral assessment. No.
Fantastic. I've just put that name in the chat there. So British Institute of Learning Disabilities, so they can do training. So second question is from David. What if you put strategies in place for all of the staff to follow and they still refuse to follow the strategies?
Can I be funny? You sack them. You send them home. Well, no. What you do, first of all, is to work with it starts from recruitment. You need to make sure to recruit the right people with the right value. And if you have the capacity to do so, I would recommend that your recruitment panel involves service users, because they will be telling you whether they feel okay with that person or not, because they will be with that person at the end of the day. Then the second step is a lot of resistance is in changing the way you are used to work. That's what I've come across the most. Oh, but we've always done that. Well, change it. Actually, it's as simple as that. So what I would do, I would sit with the team. I would talk to understand what's the resistance, where it comes from. I've been in situations, they will always be like that. They will always do this. It doesn't matter what we do, because obviously you will not see the result. But I will work with them. What is very much a solution-focused approach, right? So as there have been a situation in which it was not always like that, how did that look? How did that work? What has the person done about this situation? As well as how can we say that? So if I am thinking, it will never change, but then I can come with example in which actually things went a bit different sometimes, then I can start to see my influence on changing the outcome of something, right? And this is what I would discuss with staff. I will work with them in supervision to understand whether it's a learning issue, they don't understand PBS, whether it's a personality issue. First case, you can do reflective practice, supervision, shadowing. Second case is a disciplinary issue, and you need to probably part way with him. If the team still, when you put all the resources in place and reflective practice and support and learning opportunities, still doesn't want to do it, find another team.
And then another question here from Angela. Oh, no, sorry, I've missed one from David. Would you say PBS is more for dangerous and distressful behaviors rather than for different or dysfunctional behaviors?
I'm not sure what you intend with different or dysfunctional behavior rather than dangerous and distressful. I would say everything that causes harms to your or the others is something that may need a PBS strategy in place. Everything that is illegal or immoral needs a PBS strategy in place, just because you will get arrested. Out of these, maybe not necessarily, not all the times, I would say. It needs to be not in the eyes of the beholder. It needs to be in the eyes of the person experiencing the behavior. I think that's the real differences we need to consider. So if somebody bangs their head on the wall, yeah, definitely PBS, 100%. If somebody is making weird noises when they're on the bus, you might, but, not necessarily. If somebody is getting naked on a bus, then yes, PBS all the way, straight away. And maybe something else on top, I would suppose, because there's other things associated with that. But yeah, so although I'm not very clear of the definition, but please, if you can clarify, I would be happy. I would say that, yeah, these dangerous and distressful behaviors are probably where PBS should be implemented the most. But we should start looking at PBS in a way of, we use PBS so we can create autonomy, independence, agency, control, skill building. Behaviors is sort of secondary. Behaviors occur when all those things are not in place. So I would like to change that narrative completely. But if we need to find a behavior, yeah, if you hurt yourself or others, that's basically it. Yeah, the cutoff is there.
And then we have a couple of questions around restraint. So we've got one from Angela. Can hugging be termed restraint?
Again, depends what we intend for hugging. If for hugging we intend you coming towards me for affection and I replicate with that form of affection and hugging, then no, that's not a restraint and hugging. If hugging is I'm blocking you to move or achieve whatever is the outcome of your action, then it's restraining. Restraining basically means I'm putting in place something so you cannot do what you're doing. That's restraining. So if you are hugging somebody for them not to move, not to go away, that's restraining, yes, it is.
And then another one from David, does medication not count as a restraint as well?
Yes, it does. Chemical restraint, yes. Closing a door is restraining. Blocking somebody's pathway is restraining. Holding their hands is restraining. Using a harness is restraining. Everything that stops somebody to do whatever it is that they are doing, it's restraining.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Giuseppe. Just very quickly, I'll give you a quick kind of rundown. We've got many of the features that you're going to need to action some of what Giuseppe has been talking about in the Log My Care system. So we've got PBS planning, so you can really get to know the people you support on a deeper need, document the communication needs, as Giuseppe's mentioned, that's really important. You can set up your proactive and reactive strategies and link risk assessments and goals as well. We also have instant management tools, goal setting tools within the platform as well. There is a pop-up in the bottom left corner. So if you would like to book a demo and see the system for yourself, do go ahead and we'll be in touch and book that in for you. And then we also have, we've actually worked with Giuseppe on these himself. So we've got lots and lots of resources available on our website as well. So we've got the PBS playbook, we've got ABC charts, subjective quality of life tool, we've got goal setting resources, instant management templates. There's a lot on there. So if you want to go and start actioning some of this, we've got lots of that on our website as well. And then finally, we also have a 25% off your first 12 months if you're a new customer as well. So book a demo, scan this QR code, and we'll be in touch. But yeah, we just wanted to say, and actually, Giuseppe, how can people get in touch with you as well?
Oh, yes, I'll put the email in the chat, actually. It's info@thebestfirm.co.uk. Just for people. The best is not because I have a grandiose sense of my personality, no? Best is for behavior support tool, actually. I wanted to specify that because I've actually said, oh, that's a bit, yeah. I found it funny. The acronym comes as best, just, yeah.
I think it fits well. Well, thank you so much, Giuseppe. As always, incredibly insightful. There's going to be loads there that people can take away and start actioning straight away. So yeah, incredible. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for joining as well. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.